prior to that, General Yamashita, the general overseeing the Philippine operations, ordered all his men to pull out of Manila, destroy the bridges, and destroy um, some of the important landmarks and utilities in Manila so that it won't be of any use to the Americans. And then once that's done, for the Japanese forces to pull out, and he was trying to consolidate all his forces at a central point in Luzon for a last unified stand against the Allied forces. Most particularly, so maybe somewhere around Pampanga or Bataan. However, oops, Sanjay Iwabuchi, the admiral in charge of the forces in Manila, decided he didn't actually want to pull out. Now, just as a background to the person who would later be known as the Butcher of Manila, Sanjay Iwabuchi actually lost the ship. And now, if you're an admiral, that's a pretty shameful thing to happen to you. So, the theory is that he wanted to regain his honor by protecting the city of Manila to the death. The problem is, because he decided to do so, the city of Manila died with him eventually. A little dramatic, but let's go on. So American forces hit northern Manila at around February 3. And the first few targets that they were able to liberate was places like Malacanang, the old Bilibid prison, and the University of Santo Tomas. Now, the retaking of UST was of particular importance to the Americans, as many of their citizens were imprisoned there, and their situation was bleak. Around the onset of the Japanese occupation, around 3,000 American and enemy foreigners were rounded up and taken to UST, which was to serve as their home for 3 years. Life was difficult for the internees at first, and their situation gradually deteriorated with time. At first, they were still being given food, they were allowed certain freedoms, um, and those who were confined and incarcerated over at UST tried to proceed as if life was normal. They had kids had classes, they had socials and stuff like that. Eventually, when supplies were dwindling and the Japanese hold on the Philippines was crumbling, food started to become scarce in the area, and the prisoners started starving to death, basically. When the American forces finally liberated the school, the sight of the prisoners, starved to the bone, almost insane with hunger and hopelessness, moved the soldiers to tears. The Americans held the liberation of UST to such importance that on February 6, General MacArthur erroneously declared that Manila has fallen. The general could not possibly be more mistaken. The truth was, the battle of the city has just barely begun. Meanwhile, these people were huddled in the darkness, cut off from everything, unaware of the horrors that were to come. So from the onset, as fast as the Americans were able to enter Manila, their advance slowed to a crawl when they started getting into the cities because the Japanese have basically taken every solid building that they could put in. They put every single conceivable roadblock, barricade, and traps, whatever, just to slow the American forces down. At this point, the Americans were hitting Manila from two fronts. They're entering through Sampaloc, and they were making their way down to Quiapo and Binondo to go over to Intramuros. And then there was a second one that was passing through Paco and was just going to approach it from Malate Ermita. So basically, the plan was to sandwich Intramuros, which was where the base of operations of the Japanese were, in Intramuros and the government centers. But the going about that took too long because the Japanese were successful in barricading each other and slowing everybody down. And then the Japanese, just to slow down things further, started burning down huge portions of Binondo and Quiapo. So this is a site. This is actually Quiapo, and it's already been that there's already damaged structures from this photo. And well, actually, this one's past the on the other side of Pasig, the Metropolitan Theater being bombed. Okay, so there, I am going to turn, or I'm going to turn the floor over to my colleague, Stephen Pamarada.
Okay, so good evening everyone. Ako si Stephen Pamarada from the Heritage Collective. For this portion of the presentation natin, I'll be tackling yung sa Southern Manila area. So when I say Southern Manila, it means that part of Manila south of the Pasig River. Kasi that's how we really parang divide the city through the river, yet siya ay parang laging central part. And then yon northern part, yung places north of the Pasig River, and then southern is yung south of the Pasig River. So I'll just be handpicking some parts of the story kasi syempre napakahaba ng kwento natin pagdating sa Battle of Manila. It spanned almost a month or more than a month rather, di ba? So I'll be handpicking certain sites na meron nangyari mga atrocities in those places. Pero as a situationer, again, like what B mentioned already, yung mga bridges spanning the Pasig River, they were already destroyed during this time in the Battle of Manila, which already paralyzed yung movement ng both soldiers and civilians during that time. And then sa Southern Manila kasi, parang ang backgrounder doon, that's where the concentration of the Japanese forces were before. Parang yung naging defense line niya kasi nga, doon yung part na kumbaga, yun nga, they were escaping na kasi parang guerrilla forces na lang din sila and mas smaller troops na lang sila. And then the Americans are already advancing. So, let me start dun sa mga fateful events that took place in some of the heritage buildings that we now know today na historical sila. So, let's start with the Lazal Building. Maybe you've heard of it. Maybe you can also type in the chat na you're familiar with this place and maybe meron kayong personal stories regarding these heritage sites. So let's start with De La Salle College. So kumbaga ang date natin dito February 10, 1945. Ang background kasi dito, some of the refugees within the area of De La Salle College, which is Staff Avenue, yung mga neighbors doon, mga residents doon nag-take ng refuge sa La Salle building, knowing na yung building it was made out of concrete. And then the Japanese had the suspicion na yung mga Christian brothers are collaborating with the guerrilla enemies during that time. And then so nung February 10, kumbaga nagkaroon sila ng parang interrogation with the director of the De La Salle College, which is si Brother Egbert Xavier. Tinanong niya kung ilan yung mga tao nag-take refuge doon sa De La Salle College na campus. So, mga more than 100 daw. Pero yung official na bilang ng binilang nila, nagtaka yung mga Japanese, bakit 60 plus lang? So, parang doon nag-interrogate and then parang inarrest sila Brother Egbert Xavier along with other male refugees, and eventually, never na silang nakita after that. And then, 2 days after, on February 12, doon nangyari yung parang pinaka-naaalala natin ngayon na De La Salle College Massacre, wherein the Japanese entered the campus, and then, as a result, there are 18 Christian brothers who were killed during that time. Doon sa second floor, which is the chapel of the De La Salle College. Kumbaga, ang situation dito, para ma-visualize natin, yung railings dun sa altar ng chapel, dun ni-rounded up yung mga Christian brothers and doon sila pinagpapatay. Yung mga iba namang na ligtas doon sa loob ng De La Salle College, either nagtago sila sa cellar ng building or dun sa sacristy ng chapel. And doon sila nagtago together. Kaya they were able to escape yung bayonet saka mismong yung mga gunshots. Tapos siguro parang fast forward in the latter years, yung mga alumni ng De La Salle College would still see doon sa mga walls ng chapel ng building may mga stains of blood pa at never siyang natanggal. Kumbaga, it's only during the recent restoration na talagang na-patch up yun, natakpan siya. Pero ganun, parang doon nanuot talaga yung blood ng mga namatay dun sa, especially dun sa area ng chapel ng De La Salle College. So yun, isa lang to sa mga examples na here in Southern Manila. Next natin na site would be the Bayview Hotel, which is located along Rojas Boulevard. So notorious yung case ng Bayview Hotel kasi it was where the Japanese filled that building with women who were fleeing from their burning homes for them to rape. Tapos those young girls naman na yun na i-rape nila dahil eto medyo siguro graphic no. So parang trigger warning na lang for everybody. So there were young girls whom the rapist found hard penetrating, had their genital openings cut wider with pocket knives. So medyo ganun ka-graphic yung nangyari during that time. Yun, so that's the example for Bayview Hotel. Next na site naman natin would be yung St. Paul College, which is along Pedro Hill now, or before it was called Heran. So in February 9, 1945, parang ganun din sa De La Salle College. Parang nag-take refuge talaga yung mga residents dun sa mga concrete na mga buildings. So dito sa St. Paul College, family groups composed of at least 1,000 people. Tapos ang kwento doon, kumbaga yung Japanese, parang nagrasyon sila ng mga food. Yun yung parang i-frame up nila yung mga tao na mag-gather doon sa isang room. Tapos ang binigay nila doon, rice wine or yung sake, na kung tawagin. And then there were also candies for for the children, and then other mga for dinner nila. And then parang na-notice ng isa sa mga refugees na gumagalaw yung chandelier. And then eventually yung chandelier in the middle of that big hole kung saan sila kumakain, nahulog siya. And apparently dun sa chandeliers na yun, dun pala may mga kinabit ng mga grenades. So kumbaga nahulog yung grenades along with the chandelier, and that's where the stampede happened. Maraming namatay na rin right on the spot, pero yung mga nakatakas, ang nangyari naman is the Japanese made gunfire para hindi talaga makatakas yung kung sino man doon. So yun, nag-stampede and then nahulugan ng grenade yung mga tao sa St. Paul College. Meanwhile, the next day after this tragedy sa St. Paul, yung northern and southern forces of the American forces merged into one command so that they were able to capture one of the most important power sources in the city, which is yung Meralco Steam Plant, which is located in Isla Provisor. It's one of the islands in the Pasig River. So the Japanese fought to death and the plant was destroyed. So yun, February 10 yun. And then, meanwhile, in another building, which is the Philippine Red Cross Headquarters, nowadays, yung location nitong Philippine Red Cross Headquarters is now what we now know as yung Manila Med na hospital. So doon, the Japanese soldiers began to kill patients, physicians, mothers, and infants. And only the director of the infirmary survived, which is si Modesto Farolan. And then another site, this one naman is a German club, although hindi na siya part ng Southern Manila as part of my presentation. And I will share the brief story about this place. So early morning, the German club caught fire and the refugees in the dugouts were choking from thick smoke. So the manager of the German club was seen pleading with the Japanese on behalf of the refugees. Of course, knowing na, di ba, kaalyado ng mga Germans yung mga Japanese. But still, hindi pa rin sila kinatigan ng mga Japanese. Anyway, a group of women with babies were also kneeling before the Japanese to let them go, but they were repulsed. Eventually, the children were bayoneted, babies were thrown away, and women were abused by the Japanese. So there, and then moving all the way naman doon sa border na ng Manila at the southern part, which is Vito Cruz area, near Lasal din. We have the Perez Rubio Mansion, which is located at 150 Vito Cruz Street. So it's already near the border of Manila and Pasay cities. So that house was constructed in 1931. It was a grand house, beautifully made, and then it's owned by a distinguished businessman, si Carlos Perez Rubio. So ganun din, dahil solid yung building, yung mga neighbors around the area doon nagtago. And then yung mga Japanese, ni-round up nila yung mga people inside that house. So Okay, so the Japanese ordered them inside the house and had the group gather furniture, rugs, and drapes and pile them in the main hall. And then doon nag-pour sila ng gasoline dun sa mga pile combustibles to burn everyone alive. So yung door nun sa bahay, binar ng mga Japanese. Pero luckily they were able to break it down. But then as they escaped, they were met with the machine guns of the Japanese as they go outside. 26 people were killed, including Don Carlos, the patriarch of the house. Parang meanwhile, this similar situation also happened to this family also nearby sa kinaroroonan ni Perez Rubio Mansion. Let me share with you the story of Mr. Cillian Teng. Maybe you've heard of him. Siya yung may-ari ng isa sa mga sikat na buildings along Escolta, which is the First United Building. So he's a Chinese businessman. And then yung bahay niya is located at 161 Balagta Street, just right behind the Vito Cruz area. So namatay sila because of na sinunog yung bahay nila. Na imagine yung asawa niya together with eight of his nine children were killed during that tragedy. And then kumbaga talagang nawala din lahat ng business niya during that time. February 12 to yung area ng Vito Cruz. Yun yung maraming mga atrocities talaga. So yun, those are just some of the places in Southern Manila na nagkaroon ng maraming atrocities. So kumbaga, in conclusion, siguro i-mention ko na lang sa inyo, itong part, I will just be narrating directly, quoting directly from this book, yung By Sword and Fire. It's a great reference talaga with regard to the Battle of Manila. So kumbaga, i-conclude ko yung part ko by narrating hindi yung mga tao, hindi lang yung mga buildings na nasira, kundi also yung mga heritage natin, and yet they were also destroyed. So let me narrate some of the things na nawala during the war. Okay, so yung Philippine National Library and National Museum collections were stored in the Legislative Building, which is now known as the National Museum of Fine Arts. So kala nila matibay yung building kasi doon nila tinago doon sa isang matibay na area ng legislative building yung mga collections, and yet nasira pa rin. As we all know, nasira pa rin yung legislative building. So nilagyan nila sa basement, and yung laman noon, library holdings including 300,000 books and 25,000 assorted journals and pamphlets, all gone forever. Meron din sa museum holdings na 2,500 paintings, sculptures, numismatics, and miscellaneous items of historical value that form part of the national heritage. Meanwhile, fortunately, some 3,000 volumes of rare Filipiniana were spared kasi tinago doon sa Philippine Normal School. Although nasira yung building ng Philippine Normal School, pero yung intact yung room ko saan tinago yung rare Filipiniana collection sa 3,000 volumes. So yung included doon sa mga na-save, yung Tabacalera collection, the famous Pardo de Tavera and Zulueta collections of the original manuscript of Rizal's novels, yung Noli Me Tangere and El Filibuste mismo. But unfortunately, yun doon sa City Hall, tinago yung mga letters naman ni Rizal, saka yung mga letters and other documents dun sa vault ng Manila City Hall. As we all know, nasira din yung Manila City Hall, and along with that, nasunog na forever yung mga letters ni Rizal. So yan. Meanwhile, doon naman sa Philippine Normal School, doon naman nakatago yung records of the Philippine Language Institute. Tapos, sa University of the Philippines na naging place din ng bakbakan during that time, 200,000 volumes and assorted journals and publications was totally destroyed. So, kumbaga, let that sink in na hindi lang mga tao, hindi lang structures, but even mga things that would remind us of our history and of our heritage would be gone because of a war na talagang both sides ay talagang merong casualty. So, kumbaga, again, as we go along this presentation natin, let us be reminded na sana yung war, never na natin mapoconsider, and it should not be forgotten kung ano man yung lessons noon. So, that was my part for Southern Manila. So, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen. So basically we already talked about the first approach of the Americans to Manila, and then Stephen has talked about the collateral damage and not just on property but on heritage, art, and actual human lives. Eventually, the fighting would lead right into Muros, where some of the worst fighting in the battle theater actually occurred. And to discuss that, I now turn over the floor to Andre Julian.
Hello, good evening, everyone. So, yun nga, as thank you, B and Teba, no? As B said, no, after some after some weeks of fighting, there would be there would be a huge casualties also in the walled city of Intramuros. Actually, it happened in the late weeks of February when the Americans are preparing to assault the walled city of Intramuros after capturing some several enemy strongholds after outside of the walls. No? It is because they decided to go and invade Intramuros because there are about 2,000 Japanese Imperial Army soldiers who prepared to take their final stand in the walled city. So before actually the assault, there was a heated argument that happened between General Douglas MacArthur and the senior officers like General Walter Kruger regarding the use of air attacks. MacArthur pointed out that aerial bombardment, which is not accurate, would somehow result to death of thousands of innocent civilians inside the medieval citadel. So MacArthur, actually, General Douglas MacArthur ruled out bombings. But later, the general relented and allowed artillery after the American troops suffered heavy casualties crossing the Pasig River. This decision of not swiftly finishing the enemies with air attacks frustrated General Oscar Griswold. And quoting from his diary, he said, "War is never pretty. I am frank to say that I would sacrifice civilian Filipino lives and under such circumstances to save the lives of my men." In the end, artillery would prove to be equally destructive. Projectiles would crash through the roofs of homes, through the roofs of churches, to bomb shelters, literally destroying Intramuros. So the date for this story is around February 17. February 17, 1945, 7:30 in the morning. The greatest and heaviest bombardment seen and heard in Manila began. The Americans would fire more than 7,000 rounds of artillery, creating continuous rolling thunder for more than 60 minutes. It was pure terror for the hordes of innocent men. Imagine yourself in that area, no? It was you are in the middle of two clashing superpowers. Diba? The innocent men, women, children, young and old, they were taken hostage inside Intramuros to serve as the human shield for the Japanese. Artillery shells powdered the medieval walls instantly. They filled the air with thick dust, making it hard not only to see, but also to breathe. Shrapnels were flying everywhere and killing several refugees, killing several Filipinos, innocents, those people inside Intramuros. One account, the boy named Tony Trinidad, he was like 11 years old when he witnessed the barrage at San Agustin Church. He recalled seeing a woman cooking in a large cauldron when a shell exploded. He found her torso in the huge caldero, but her head was missing. Here's a video of the casualties in the walls as the Americans enter through the destroyed, powdered walls of the medieval citadel.
Heaven watch the Philippines, keep her safe from harm. Oh, the sons and their precious ones in the city and on the farm. Friendly the American, let her always be. Heaven watch the Philippines and keep her forever free. And keep her forever free.
Anday, you can continue.
Yeah. So yes, heaven watched the Philippines. When the Americans entered, not a shot was fired. The bombardment of Intramuros had been tremendous success, and the American troops pushed into the walled city using flamethrowers. They used grenades and even bazookas. The beautiful cobblestone streets of Intramuros are now full with rubbles of homes, of shops, and churches. The intermittent street fighting continues as the troops pressed deeper inside Intramuros. In the ruins of Santa Rosa College was Rosalinda, an 11-year-old girl whom the Japanese stabbed 38 times. Yes, 38 times. 11 years old. She miraculously survived 12 days with bandaged wounds and a hole in her stomach, exposing her intestine. This picture is Rosalinda in her best pink dress, sitting in the witness chair, trying to tilt her dangling feet to keep her sandals from falling off. She was weeping as she recounts how the Japanese murdered her parents and stabbed her mercilessly. Actually, earlier his father was taken to Fort Santiago to be never seen again. In the nearby Santo Domingo Church, Rosalinda was with her bloody mother as she was gravely injured after being hit with a grenade and bayoneted by a Japanese soldier. Her mother whispered, "Rosalinda, I am dying. Always be good." She slowly crawled her way until she reached Santa Rosa College, where her nuns took her in. Rosalinda survived to tell the tale. Actually, the Gothic Church of Santo Domingo that was destroyed in the advent of war was turned into a massacre site as the Japanese troops escorts the Filipinos through the church and kill them one by one. For days, what you can hear are the sounds of slaughter mixed with the moans of the victims. Many of them were children and women. Rosalinda also personally witnessed the killing of Totoy. Totoy was a 3-month-old baby that was tossed up in the air, and he was received with a bayonet as he came down. 3-month-old baby. The Americans pressed further and captured San Agustin Church. The only occupants of the church left were the dead and those too wounded to escape. Several wheelbarrows filled with unburied bodies were found in the church patio. And inside the different rooms of the convents were piles of body parts and dead bodies, either from stab by the Japanese soldiers or the shrapnel wounds by the Americans. Now the troops are zeroing in to capture Fort Santiago. They advanced to Calle Real and they saw the 30-year-old Augustinian priest named Father Bellarmino de Celis. The Japanese, according to Father Bellarmino de Celis, the Japanese crammed around 70 men, priests and civilians included, inside a bomb shelter barely 5 feet and 50 feet long. The shelter had 3 holes for respiration, and after 30 minutes, through those holes, hand grenades were thrown in. So with the commotion and all of the panic, some survivors tried to run outside, but a group of Japanese were waiting with their guns and bayonets, and those who tried to escape were either shot and killed. Later, the Japanese covered the entrance with stones and dirt, burying the survivors. Father Bellarmino was wounded by the grenade, but he was able to miraculously survive when he was able to make a small hole where he was able to breathe. A small hole. He stayed there for 72 hours. Father Bellarmino and another survivor, Julio Rocamora, were the only 2 survivors of that event. They barely able to crawl across the ruins of Ayuntamiento, where they found a water in the tank of a toilet and they drank, regaining their health. Thankfully, the Americans found them, they were rescued, and later restored back to health. Then finally, the Americans was able to reach and clear the complex of Fort Santiago, which was defended by around more than 400 Japanese troops. For almost 400 years, Fort Santiago had served as the epicenter of evil in Manila. It served as a prison cell, an interrogation chamber, even a torture center. When the Americans were here and the Americans took over the Philippines, the dungeons were sealed and it was transformed into the offices of the Philippine Army. But after the fall of Manila, it was resurrected. According to one Filipina, the Fort Santiago is alive again. And it was most alive during the Battle of Manila. As soon as the Japanese realized that the battle is almost over and they are at the losing side, they engaged in an orgy of mass murder inside the Fort Santiago. They would nightly slaughter civilian men who might pose a threat. They would be marched into the cell blocks, and the Japs would pour gasoline in the floor and burn them inside. The Filipinos will try to escape, but they will be machine gunned. After fighting the Japanese and seeing their cruelty outside of the walls, American soldiers became accustomed to the barbarity of the Japanese massacres. Diba na what Stephen mentioned earlier, the massacres outside of the walls, the Americans already seen them. They became accustomed to the barbarity of the Japanese. But even those could not prepare them for what they saw and what they found inside Fort Santiago. Even at the start of the battle, the Japanese soldiers already executed thousands of Filipino males inside Intramuros, inside the fort. One dungeon was full of ashes and bones, and the entrance was badly blackened and charred. The American soldiers found several warehouses of the dead with several dead bodies piled on each other. But none actually compared to the underground dungeon. unlike the other rooms full of dead people, all of whom showed signs of being instantly shot or killed. The people in these dungeons were locked in a cell with a steel door bolted, and they were left to die of starvation. Today, a marble cross marks the final resting place of approximately 400 Filipino civilians who were victims of the atrocities during the Battle of Manila in 1945. Quoting CBS News correspondent William Dunn, the Manila of 1941 was a unique Manila. A Manila that had never existed before. A Manila that would never exist again. Intramuros was a medieval citadel full of life. The cradle of Christianity that housed convents, cathedrals dating back 300 years. It housed educational institutions that molded our heroes, our presidents. It was a little fortress that preserved its Spanish-era charm around the bustling modern American city. After several days of battle, thousands of innocent civilians lost their lives, and the historic district suffered 93% loss. As the American survivor William Brady puts it, one side killed and destroyed us willfully. The other side killed and destroyed us willy-nilly. Now it's up to you. It's up to us to make Intramuros and Manila alive again. And we do hope that by staging this event, these stories remain. Thank you very much.
Ang gabing payapa
Thank you very much for that, Andre. Um, so so it goes. Eventually, the Japanese were driven out and killed over at Intramuros, and the final stages of the war were upset. Around this time, on this very day, the last bits of resistance of the Japanese were being mopped up. To further talk about that, I turn the floor over now to Diego Torres of Renacimiento Manila. Diego, nakasilent ka?
Hi, hi. Good evening, everyone. So I'm going to discuss the final stages of the Battle of Manila, the clearing of the government center. Now, if you're not familiar sa layout ng City of Manila, outside Intramuros, there are several government buildings constructed based on the Burnham Plan to transform the area around the Luneta Park into a civic center. So you have there the post office building, the city hall, which was brand new. It was built in 1940. And the legislative building, originally, was supposed to be the library, the National Library. And then around Luneta Park was supposed to be several more government buildings. But due to budgetary constraints, they were only able to build, for example, the agriculture building and the finance building. So these areas comprise what was known as the government center. Now, while Intramuros was actually being pounded by guns, the Americans first had to clear several areas near Intramuros in order to be able to approach the walled city. Because based on their planning, they were planning to approach initially from the south. But since there were several buildings to be cleared, they decided to approach Intramuros from the river. But they still needed to approach inland by Arroceros. So they needed to clear two major structures there. You have the post office building and the city hall. So the post office building stands in the curve of the Pasig River, overlooking Binondo, Santa Cruz, and Quiapo. So it had a domineering position. It was defended by the Japanese, and the American infantry attempted to storm it several times before it was eventually pounded with artillery and self-propelled guns and gradually overcame. With the Americans were able to overcome the opposition. City Hall also experienced the same thing. The Americans had to smash it with artillery so bad that the entire side, the eastern side, fronting Arroceros, in the area now occupied by SM City, it collapsed due to the American artillery. From there, the Americans stormed the building, fought floor by floor inside that structure. Gradually, the Japanese, 40 Japanese, were holed up in the basement. In the first floor, since they refused to surrender, they were all eliminated by flamethrower. At this stage in the battle, the Americans were just killing the Japanese off because the Japanese were willing to die for what they believed they were fighting, and the Americans willingly fulfilled their wishes. So fast forward after the battle for Intramuros, you get Intramuros is already cleared. The last remaining pockets is now the legislative building, and currently it's the National Museum of Fine Arts, and then the finance and agricultural building. So these were now the last areas that had to be cleared. So these structures were formidable structures. Why? Like the other complexes built during the Americas, this used concrete, reinforced concrete. It has rebars, and they're solid structures, ideal for what the Japanese had in mind. Also, these structures were surrounded by parklands, meaning any infantry trying to assault these buildings will be susceptible to enemy fire. You could be seen for miles around. In fact, it affected the operations in Intramuros. That's why the Americans had to clear Fort Santiago first. Then they had to clear the Puerta Real Gardens from the PLM side because you can't attack the Japanese strongholds in Intramuros via Luneta because the two buildings and then the legislative building were still there. Today, it's part of the National Museum complex. So the first structure that they had to assault was the legislative building and the agriculture building. Attempts to storm the agricultural building were thwarted initially because several apartments along Calao, San Luis Street back then, were still occupied by the Japanese. So they had to clear those first. And then the legislative building itself. For 2 days, Americans tried storming that building, but they were always driven out. So they resorted to their guns. Whenever they could save American lives, the Americans used their big guns. So using their artillery pieces, self-propelled guns, and tanks, they bombarded the legislative building on this day for 2 hours. So they bombarded it straight for 2 hours, which led to the collapse of the north side of the building. The entire side just fell onto itself. It's the side fronting Intramuros. So that portion collapsed the facade, so it was destroyed. Then the Americans stormed in from Taft Avenue. It was much easier, and within the day, they had cleared the top floor and they were fighting the Japanese in the basement. Gradually, the position was destroyed. Next were now the twin buildings, the finance and agriculture. So they did the same. They pounded the structures, shelled them until the structures were collapsing on themselves. And then the Americans stormed these buildings, but the Japanese were still alive. The Japanese, for some reason, were able to survive these artillery bombardments. So they broadcasted an ultimatum to the Japanese around February 28, telling them that surrender now because the fight is hopeless. So you can surrender. There are at least estimated to be 200 Japanese in each building. In the agriculture building, they said the broadcast, 30 minutes, they waited for the response. Nothing came. So the Americans poured a mixture of gasoline into this building and then set it on fire. Once the fire had burned, all Japanese inside the agricultural building were killed. They broadcasted the same message to the finance building. 22 Japanese at least surrendered there. But the fighting continued for the other days. So by March 2, they have eliminated most of this through the sheer use of artillery, flamethrowers, everything. Once opposition was destroyed in these 2 buildings, after several surveys, by March 3, the Americans declared that the Battle of Manila was over. It was over indeed, no? But the casualty, the damage was so great to the city. So it has already been mentioned, the damage in terms of heritage and cultural treasures, the physical damage to the city. In Intramuros alone, 93% of the city, of the walled city was destroyed. What were almost no district survive without some damage. No, the most intact district would be Santa Ana because only the lower portion nearer to Paco was damaged, as well as parts of Sampalo. But districts, as you go nearer to the Pasig River, more of the districts are destroyed. You have 90% of Tondo, 80% of Binondo, at least 80 to 70% of Quiapo was destroyed. Then you have Santa Cruz at 90%. The business, industrial, and residential districts of the city were all destroyed during the Battle of Manila. Because you have Ermita, Malate, Paco, Pandacan, all destroyed at 90% damaged. Add to this the casualties themselves. The buildings, of course, they were destroyed. But the greatest tragedy was the loss of lives. You have 100,000 civilians eventually killed during the fighting. The Americans lost 1,000 Americans fighting, and more Americans were lost to at least 10 times of that to injuries during the battle. The Japanese, on the other hand, lost 14,000 to 16,000 men fighting in the Battle of Manila. So there's already a lot of casualties on both sides. But it was the civilians who suffered the most. Not only did they lose their relatives, they lost their loved ones, but they also lost their homes and their possessions. So entire stories, identities, entire clans were affected by the fighting that took place in the city of Manila. And then you have the damages to this once great city. So Manila, as mentioned earlier, was a cosmopolitan city. praised as the Pearl of the Orient. The city was a product of 400 years of exchanges, of being one of the first global cities in the world, no? Connecting Asia to the Americas, and then that's a place where Europeans also mingled with peoples from all over the world. So that city was lost during the Battle of Manila, along with a lot of its tradition. For example, the destruction of Intramuros destroyed many of its churches. And we, as a Christian country, value these Christian traditions. And a lot of them were moved to other places after the war. The churches moved, the processions moved. Like, for example, you have the Lanaval, which used to be in Santo Domingo. That was one of Manila's biggest celebrations in the pre-war years. But since the Dominicans moved out of Intramuros due to the trauma that the area suffered during the war, they also moved these practices outside. And Intramuros vanished as a place, as a center for religious activities. Only now is it trying to make that comeback, no? As a center for religious activities and tradition. And as mentioned earlier by Stephen, you have the great loss of libraries. So he mentioned the public libraries, but it was also the religious orders who lost a lot of their records because they had stored in their monasteries and convents, like the Franciscans, for example, the records of their churches. And how important are these church records? They're very important, especially for looking back into the past. Because remember, it was the priests, the friars, who began doing missionary work with the natives during the 1600s, with the early Filipinos. They were able to chronicle and document how our practices were, how did we live in that time. In those records were lost a lot of things that would actually help us today, that could have helped us today in reinforcing our pre-colonial identities. So we will never know the contents of many of these, as well as other libraries lost, because, for example, the fighting in the basement of the Legislative Building, that's where actually most of the records of the National Library was destroyed during the Battle of Manila. So to conclude, the Battle of Manila was a catastrophic event, and actually it is considered a national tragedy. Manila is not just any city. The destruction of any city, of any settlement, is in itself a tragedy. But the destruction of a major capital city, a major global city, a major world city like Manila, is a national tragedy and a blow to understanding human civilizations and how they contact with each other. So it is actually sad to see how Filipinos today, they go to Intramuros, for example, and when they're there, they say, oh, it's like we're not in the Philippines, parang tayo nasa ibang bansa. That's sad because what you're seeing in Intramuros is just a parcel of what Manila used to be, of what part of our identity used to be, and we lost that during the Battle of Manila. That sense of what we were, of what we are, we lost that. Because after the war, we had to push on, we have to move on. The issues that the war brought will have to be tackled: poverty, lack of infrastructure, destruction of the mass transit system. These are things that we're still grappling to this day. The lack of proper mass transit systems in Manila due to the destruction of the trams, the trains, and the lack of attention brought to this after the war. Those are effects of the destruction brought by the city. Why are there so many urban poor in this area of Intramuros, for example? It's because the area was depopulated. After the war, you have all the people moving out because of what they experienced. And then you'll have more people moving in from the provinces into areas that had no one living there to begin with after the war. And then you have Tondo. So you have the influx of people coming in from the war-torn provinces, from the provinces experiencing rebellion after the war. We had to carry on. And the effects of that, as mentioned by Julian, Manila after the war was never the same. So it was really a loss. So when you're looking at those black and white photos of the city, you're looking at a world that's gone. Yes, Manila carried on, did not die, but it wasn't the same after the war. So it is through this that we get to understand the tragedy that happened. That's why we must never forget what happened in the Battle of Manila, because it gets to answer a lot of the things that we complain about, our experience in the city of Manila. But why are there not so many heritage structures in the city? Because a lot of them were burned. And what didn't survive? What survived the war? We're destroying. Because we don't value them. Because we don't see them as part of a broader urban design, of a broader urban landscape. Because it was destroyed. We take it for granted because this cityscape was destroyed during the war. So the lesson for us is not to forget the Battle of Manila, to learn from it, try to reconnect to our past without forgetting, moving forward without forgetting our past. And in the troubled world that we are in today, we must always strive for peace because we ourselves, we as a country and the city of Manila is a testament to what happens when a people in a city sent to the trauma and tragedy of war. So with that, I end my portion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andre, for that. Just to add a little bit more to what Andre, sorry, Diego said. So Manila was free. After 1 month of fighting, Manila was free at last. But at what great cost? The city that was once called the Pearl of the Orient, the Queen City of the Pacific, the Paris of Asia, has been completely destroyed. Hundreds of heritage treasures are forever lost and can never, ever be recovered. And beneath the rubble, someone's brother, sister, mother, or father, entire families, 100,000 unarmed, innocent civilian lives have perished. Manila smelled of death and decay for years. And yet, the most insidious was to come. For in the following years, after that fateful month in 1945, we moved on. We picked up the pieces. We forgot. The souls of a city lost, the souls of 100,000 innocent lives, we forgot. No longer. Tonight, we honor them. And there you have it. Um, on behalf of my compatriots, brothers in arms, and whatever terms we would want to use, I would like to thank everybody for being very patient um, with us. I mean, we started absolutely late, and we apologize for that. And I thank those who have come and stuck on and waited for us. Thank you very much. Um, we are a group. We come from different heritage groups and tour groups united under the banner of Manila because all of us, and there are more of us out there that want to see Manila, to see Manila raised to the levels that it can be raised to. You will, I think I can mention that you will see more projects from me, from the three other individuals along with me in the next coming months. So please tune in for that. And now I come to the point that this was a free presentation, and we do this for the love of Manila.